All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to see you all. Here's what I want you guys to do while I'm taking attendance, all right? I'm going to explain it, and then I want you to work with a partner on this. It's helpful if you talk it out. My brother's a programmer, and when I have problems or issues, sometimes I'll call him, and I'll talk to him about it. And he's like, there's a word for this. I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, where you talk something out with somebody, and all of a sudden you realize the solution, and they didn't do anything but just sit there and nod. It's called rubber ducking. They're like, because sometimes you just need to say it out loud. And they're like, instead of eating up somebody else's time while they stand there and just go like this, they're like, just tell it to a rubber duck, and you'll figure it out as you go. So I want you to have a partner to work this out with, because again, saying things out loud can help you process what's happening. Here's our setup. The students in Mr. Sanchez's class are converting distances measured in miles to kilometers. Why might they be doing something like that? They're building something. That's possible. Any other ideas about why they might be converting these distances? What does most of the rest of the world use? Do they measure in miles like we do? Most of the time they measure in kilometers. That's most of the rest of the world. All of the European Union, if I'm not mistaken, China, India, they all use like metric system. We don't, because we like to be difficult. If you're thinking about yourself here at school, what type of classes would you possibly be doing these types of conversions in? Any math class? Science classes too. Math and science classes, you're going to be doing conversions back and forth. We do them in math class specifically because they get used in science classes so much. So we want you to have plenty of practice with it. Okay, so they are working on estimating the number of kilometers. They're not doing precise calculations here. They're working on some of the skills that we've been working with. So 2 of the students in Mr. Sanchez's class have come up with ways to estimate when they convert from miles into kilometers. Abby takes the number of miles and she doubles it, and then she subtracts 20% of the result. And Renato first divides the number of miles by 5, and then multiplies the result by 8. What I want you guys to do right now is just part A. I want you to look at what Abby did, and just like the game that we played yesterday, the I have, who has, or when I had you write things on whiteboards, I want you to take this verbal description of what Abby did, and I want you to write it down symbolically, so using any of these symbols that we wrote about yesterday. And then I want you to do the same thing for Renato. Take what he said he was going to do and write it down symbolically. This is on page 81 in your book. I'm going to take attendance while you guys are doing that. Okay. Yes, sir. Can you get what? Some help? Yeah, let's try to do this. I want to crowdsource some of this. So let's talk about this together. Walk me through. I'm going to use purple for Abby. When I look at what Abby describes doing, what operation would I use at the beginning of what she said? What did she do to the number of miles? Doubled it. Do we know how many miles were involved? No. So we're going to take the number of miles. I don't know what that is, so I need a variable to represent that. What do you guys want to use as the variable here?
I used M.
You used M? Let's use M for miles. A lot of people earlier today used X. That's okay. You choose some unknown, some variable for this thing that we're trying to figure out. And then it says that she doubles it. What operation would I use for doubling? Multiplication. Multiplication by what?
2.
By 2. So how can I represent that here at the beginning? We can do parentheses. What would go inside them?
The variable times 2.
the variable and the times 2, so I can do m times 2. Do you guys agree that that's an accurate representation so far? Is that the only way to write this idea? What's another way that I could write this same exact idea? 2m. Either one of these would be correct so far, right? Like, we're not done with her expression because I'm not done doing the things that she described. But I can represent this either way here. These are equivalent. Look different, same meaning. That's what I mean when I say they're equivalent. They visually appear different, but they have the same result or the same output. So far, so good? Dante, I'm curious. I'm totally going to pick on you. What does she do after she doubles things?
What do you mean?
Well, what operation does it describe next?
Oh, right.
Subtraction. They were nice and they gave me that. So I'm going to have a minus sign here, right? Then she subtracts, and I'm going to have like both of these going at the same time, just because I know we have different representations around the room. What does she subtract?
20%.
20%. When I'm talking about percents, it's always 20% of something, right? Like, I can't just go to the store and they're like, you know, how much is my total? And they're like, 20%. I'm like, so how much am I giving you? Like, I need to know 20% of something else. 20% of what here? What does it say?
The result.
Of the result. So there's all kinds of words going on here. One of them showed up on one of our posters yesterday, and I got really excited when I saw it. Which of those 3 words showed up on one of our posters? Of. What operation do I use when I see of? Multiplication. So I'm going to multiply, and then it says the result. The result. That's another word that if it didn't show up on one of our posters, probably should be there, right? What do you think they mean by the result? The answer. Which one of our posters could we put the result on? Which one of these back there, the equal sign? Would you add that to the poster that's right behind you? Every time as we're doing these word problems, if we see a new word show up and we're like, what symbol do I use for that? What's that mean? I want to add it to our posters so that we've got these word banks as we're struggling through some of these verbal representations. So we're going to multiply by the answer. Multiply 20% by the answer. The answer to what? What has she done before subtracting?
Multiplication.
She did the doubling, right? The multiplication of 2 times the number of miles by the answer, 2 times m. So I want 20% of that. How do you represent 20% of something? How would I find 20% of something? You told me of means to do what? Multiplication. So I know I'm going to need some multiplication here. 20% gets multiplied by the answer, which we said was 2m, right? How do I multiply 20% by something? Like, I can't put this into most calculators, right? So how would I put that in? How would I do a percent on a calculator?
Do we divide?
Divide by what?
100?
Yeah. So I'd have 20 divided by 100, because that's 20% of multiply The result, well, what I had done just before then that I have the result of is 2 times the number of miles. Can anybody think of another way to write 20%? How else could I represent 20%? 0.2. So I could also do 0.2 getting multiplied to 2m. These two have the exact same meaning. They're written slightly differently, but they both describe exactly what Abby did. She took the number of miles, she multiplied it by 2, and she did that first, right? So it's right up here at the beginning. And then after she had that, she subtracted 20% of the doubling. Are we all right with that particular expression? What I do when I'm writing these expressions from verbal representations, I just walk through a couple words at a time. Anytime I see an operation, I'm like, whoop, this operation is happening to what things? And I'll stop and struggle with that for a little bit until I figure that out, and then I'll move on to the next part. You look like you have a question, Asasia. Not Asasia, Azina. Sorry.
I'm confused by the part when you multiply it to you said that's the result?
The result, yes. Okay, so says she takes the number of miles and doubles it. Do you see the comma after that? So that means on her calculator, that's her first step. She would do 2 times m, and then she's going to hit enter or equals. And she's going to get an answer. A synonym for an answer is a result of some operation. So she has this number on her calculator, 2 times whatever she did. She takes that, and she has to multiply it by 20%, or 0.2, and then that she takes away from this over here.
So the beginning part is the result?
Yes,
Okay.
because she has an answer for that first.
Oh, okay.
Yes, does that make sense?
Yeah, I got it.
It's like when we were doing stuff in the calculator the other day, and I was like, hit equals in between each step. Every time you would get a new result. A lot of times when we see that result there, we're going to need some parentheses because we're going to do something to what we just got. Does that make sense? Oh, and how you feeling about this? So? Okay, that's okay. Going from words to symbols can be really challenging, and that's why we're practicing it together. I know one of the things that students are most afraid of is story problems, and this is why. Sometimes it's really hard to figure out what operation you would use based on the language that was chosen. Let's try Renato's. What did Renato describe doing? What did he do? Divides the number of miles by 5. So I want to represent this symbolically. AB, how can I symbolically represent taking the number of miles and dividing it by 5? M over 5. That means m divided by 5, right? Okay. What did he do after that? And then he multiplies the result. So everything that we just got from dividing by 5, we're going to multiply by 8. Do I need parentheses around the m over 5?
Yeah.
Not really.
Is it going to hurt if they're there? Is it going to change it if they're not? Think about order of operations. Order of operations says to start with what? Parentheses. Let's imagine for just a minute that they're not there, okay? Because I want to see if the order would be any different if we take the parentheses away. So if I don't have the parentheses, do we have any exponents? And then we get to the multiplication and division step. And a lot of people get confused here Because the multiplication and division step happens at the same time, and you do whichever one you see first as you move from left to right. So if I'm looking at Renato's expression, as I move from left to right, what's the first thing I would do? The division. And after that, I would do the multiplication. If I have the parentheses around it, what's the first thing I do? The division. And then the multiplication. So the order that I do it in doesn't change if the parentheses are there or not there. If the order that you would do them in changes without them, then you need them. If it's the same order, then you don't. So you guys okay if I don't have them? Or would you rather me leave them there? Because it doesn't matter. If you put parentheses there that don't need to be there, I'm not going to take off points. So if you're unsure, you're welcome to put them there. Are you guys okay with this one? Did Renato do anything else? No. So that's his full expression right there. We can write it with or without the parentheses. Same exact meaning. I want to go down and look at part B now. Abby and Renato are describing doing two different things. But they're both trying to estimate the same thing, aren't they? I want to know if they're going to get the same answer. Because if they get the same answer, it's okay if they go about it different ways. But if they end up in different places, then somebody's doing it wrong for sure. It might be both of them. But if they don't get the same answer, then somebody's definitely wrong. How would I decide if these give the same answer? What could I do? Use the same number? Yeah, we could substitute in. We could use a test value. What's a test value that I might use here? 10 sounds good. So let's test it with 10 miles. This isn't the only way to see if they'd get the same answer, by the way. But this is one method that would work to tell me if I get the same answer. So in Abby's method, she would take 2 and multiply it by 10 first, right? What would that give us? 20. And then after that, she's going to do 20% of 2 times 10. I'm going to change back to purple here because I want to try to keep the same colors. So over here, I've got all kinds of parentheses going on. What would I do first? 2 times 10 on the inside, because I need the results of that before I do 20% of it, right? So 20 minus 0.2 times 20. And then I have to do the multiplying before I do any subtraction, because that's order of operations here. All the multiplication and division has to be done before I do any addition or subtraction. So what is 0.2 times 20?
40.
Close. 2 times 20 would give me 40. What is 0.2 times 20? Close. How much? It's 4. If I do 10% of something, that's dividing it by 10. Do you guys remember that exercise that we did the other day when we were dividing and multiplying by tens and it moved the decimal point? If I need 10% of this, I would move the decimal point one place. That would be 2. If I want 20%, that would be 2 of those. 30% would be 3 of those. You're welcome to pop it in your calculator as well, but I do want to work on some of these mental math skills as well.
We divided by 20, right?
Here,
Yeah.
I did 0.2 times 20. Because remember, it's of, which means to multiply. So I have 20 minus 4, which would give me what? 16. Okay, so using Abby's method, with a test value of 10 miles, She says that that is the same as 16 kilometers. If Renato's method is equivalent, we'll get the same answer. So let's try Renato's way of doing it, but with 10 miles. First, we would take the number of miles and do what to it? Divide it by 5. And then after that, we'll multiply by 8. What is 10 divided by 5? And when I do 2 times 8, I get 16. Do these two ways of approaching the problem give the same answer? Yeah, so same meaning, that is to say they are equivalent. They look different from the beginning. Something else we could have done to verify this is we could have taken their original expressions and we could have simplified them. Like I could have actually multiplied these two things together. What is 0.2 times 2? How much? 0.4. So 2m minus 0.4m. Are those like terms that we could combine? I have 2 minus 0.4, because the m just comes along for the ride. What is 2 minus 0.4? 1.6 times the number of miles. Well, 1.6 times 10 is 16, so that makes sense. With Renato, I'm dividing by 5, but I'm multiplying by 8. Does anybody remember how to multiply fractions together? I have m over 5 times, I can take any whole number and turn it into a fraction, right? By putting it over 1. And then when we multiply fractions, we multiply numerator and numerator together, denominator and denominator together. So I would have 8m over 5. Do 8 divided by 5 in your calculator. $1.6. His method had the exact same simplified form, but they both approached it different ways. This idea right here is called equivalent expressions. Two different ways of writing something that has the exact same output or the exact same answer. On your homework tonight, I'm going to ask you to do that for me. I'm going to give you a situation, and I want you to write an expression for it. And I want you to explain back to me why that expression really does represent those words. So like right here, if I were to do this with Abby, I would say, well, she multiplied the number of miles by 2. That's what she meant by double it. And then she took that answer, and she took 20% of it. So I would do 0.2 times this to find 20% of that. So you're just going to like put it back into words. Like, what do all the pieces mean? So that I can clearly see the connection between your expression and the words that were described. And then I want you to look at the exact same situation, but come up with a different way of writing the expression. Looks different means the same. I could have written this right here. That looks different than Abby's original expression, but it has the same meaning. So when you simplify things, that's another way of writing the same expression. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm going to pass out a piece of paper. This is our last couple minutes. We're going to do the bottom half of the page. Because of time, we're going to ignore the top half of the page for right now, okay? I'm going to send these back. Take one, pass the rest back. And I want you guys to work with a partner or a small group. So the bottom half of the page, I have printouts from Fandango of different local movie theaters and their ticket prices. So I want you to look at these different theaters and ticket prices. Every pair of people is going to have to share these. Nope, that's different theaters. That's okay. No, I wasn't clear. It's my fault. Nope. Sorry. Don't pass it back, guys. These ones don't pass back. My apologies. I wasn't super clear. Go. Don't pass these back. Because we've got 2 theaters per page and it's different theaters on all 3 pages. Okay. So here's what I want you guys to do. How much is an adult ticket? How much is a senior ticket? How much is a child's ticket? Some of the theaters don't have differences in prices on those. Welcome, ma'am. You are going to need this. You're welcome. Thank you, ma'am. All right, so you're going to pick out 5 of these theaters. I don't care which 5. We've got 6 on these pages. I want you to figure out, you've got $100 to spend on question A. In which theater can you take the most adults and children for $100? To a matinee. Do you guys know what a matinee is? A matinee is like a middle of the day show. Some theaters offer special lower prices if you go during the middle of the day. Some theaters don't. So when you look at these different ticket prices, if they have a special price for a matinee, cool. You can use the lower price there. If they don't have special ticket prices for a matinee, you would just pay the normal regular ticket price there. So I want you to figure out in which theater you can take the most adults and children if for every 2 children you have to take 1 grown-up to supervise them. So you can't have like 1 adult and 50 kids. Not going to work. So for every 2 kids, you have to have 1 grown-up to supervise them. What's the maximum number of people you can take? If you get done with that one before the end of the class period, then I want you to come down here. What is the cost of 4 children and 3 adults for a matinee at each of these theaters? So pick 5 of the theaters, find how much it costs at each one. And then which theater has the best deal for a family of 5 to attend the movies? Decide whether it's a matinee or a regular showing, a nighttime showing. That's what I want you guys to work on for the remainder of the class period. If you have questions, I'm happy to help. Please work with partners or small groups to do this. All right, guys, I realize we're only about 3 minutes to the bell, so I just want to let you know what I have for you tonight. There is a homework tonight. I described it a little bit. There's 2 scenarios that I want you to look at on the homework. For each one of these 2 scenarios, you're going to write an expression. You're going to explain how that expression is representing the situation. You're going to write another expression for the same situation. Looks different means the same, like with Abby and Renato. Looks different means the same. And tell me how that second expression still accurately represents the same situation. So you're going to do that for one situation, and then you're going to do the same thing for the other situation. When you turn this homework in, Canvas will lie to you and say you got 0 points. Because all of this is stuff you have to type in, okay? Canvas will not automatically grade any of it. I have to get in and grade it by hand. So please don't freak out when you see a 0 show up. It's not going to go into Skyward or anywhere else until I go in and grade it by hand and you have a chance to see what you got, what you're still shaky on, what you need to maybe correct and redo, okay? Let me know if you guys have any questions. If you get really stuck on how to do it, we can go back and forth and we can do one of them together, okay? Just let me know if you have any questions on these things.